A sickness was making its way throughout the Red Wings locker room, and despite the Devils playing somewhat decent, they still found a way to lose. But were they screwed over by a couple of bad calls? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. What a game for the New Jersey Devils. They went into the Motor City and dominated the Detroit Red Wings. The advanced analytics show it. The Devils' aggression, it was there. Their offense, it was there. Their determination, it was there. They should have come out on the winning end. They should be back in the win column, right? Wrong. The Devils are their own worst enemy. Despite doing everything right for the most part, they still found a way to lose this game, dropping this matchup by a score of 5-3. In the first segment, there were some positives from this game, so let's talk about the positivity before I convert into the negatives. That's going to be the focus of segment 2 because, trust me, I think the Devils were screwed over not once but twice by the referees. And then in the third and final segment, like I do with every post-game recap, I will compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade. Like I said, I'm trying to be optimistic. I'm not trying to overreact to anything. It's still October. Devils have not played a full month of hockey. Still plenty of season to be played. We're only 10 games into the NHL season. Let's not overreact. Now, I don't want to coddle the Devils, but they still did some good in this matchup. The biggest storyline heading into this game was the return of Brett Pesce and Luke Hughes. They made their season debuts, and Pesce made his Devils debut. And for the most part, outside of Luke Hughes' blunder that resulted in the Red Wings taking a 2-1 lead heading into the first intermission, which, trust me, I will talk more about in the second segment, I'd say it was a good homecoming for both these players because Brett Pesce, I was very impressed with his defense. At one point in the game, he wasn't afraid to throw his body around. He broke up a 2-on-1 advantage in favor of the Red Wings by playing some strong defense. That's exactly what I want to see from Pesce. He's not going to light up the offense. That's not his game. His game is to be a defensive-minded defenseman, and he has plenty of experience. Prior to joining the Devils, he spent the last 10 years with the Carolina Hurricanes. He knows a thing or two, and I loved this Devils debut from Pesce. And for Luke Hughes, he was creating offense. He looked like he didn't skip a beat. And he did record an assist on the Eric Haula goal in the second period. He got the secondary assist, and he was trying to set up Timo Meier on a one-timer shot, but the puck found its way to Haula's stick, and he redirected it on in. I don't think that was the play call, but Eric Haula was in the right spot at the right possible time. Nonetheless, Luke Hughes walked away with a point, creating offense. Brett Pesce asserting himself defensively. In with Pesce and Hughes, out Missoul and Nemitz, and I think that was the right move by Sheldon Keefe because, like I said, Missoul, he's only played in one NHL game, and that was a few days ago against the Lightning. And for Nemitz, something's just missing from his game. I know he's more of a defensive-minded defenseman, but he still has a lot more work to do. Nico Hischier, he recorded 2 goals in this matchup. Both of his goals came via the power play. Nico Hischier was just everywhere, and I even put this out on social media. It looks like Hischier is a lot more aggressive when it comes to creating offense. And it seems like he's gained a little bit more muscle. And this is something I've been talking about the last season or two, which is I want Hischier to be a little more selfish. I know his first instinct is to set up his teammates. He has the capability to score, and he did that in this game. And it sort of reminded me what he did against the Washington Capitals last week, which was the Devils. They were in a funk. They needed to find a way out of it ASAP. And Nico took it upon himself to try to keep his team alive. A lot of people last season were complaining about Nico, saying he was too soft, he was too passive, he didn't really lead by example. But this year, I know, once again, we're only 10 games in, but I'm liking this new Nico Hischier. And I don't mind if he's selfish because he has the capability to score. Last season, in 71 game appearances, he recorded 27 goals. In 10 games this year, he already has 7, which leads the team. And he also has 3 assists. That gives him 10 points in 10 games, a point per game player. Someone else I want to talk about while we're on the subject of point per game player, Timo Meier. He got the primary assist on Eric Halla's goal, similar to what I just said a few minutes ago when discussing Luke's game. Timo also has 10 points in 10 game appearances this season. And it's just amazing what a different coach's system, him playing at his correct position, being on the top 6. A lot of people were saying like the Devils re-signing Meier to an 8-year extension was a mistake. And I was just like, no, give him some time. He looks a lot more healthy compared to last year. And I've been rather impressed. Nico Hischier, Timo Meier, point per game players, 10 games into the season. The Devils' third line, like I said a few minutes ago, the aggression did pick up for New Jersey compared to their last game against the Lightning, where people were saying that the team was too soft once again. The third line was a good checking line. And going back to Nico Hischier's goal, that was created by Stefan Noesen. He had a good hit, got control of the puck, Jesper Bratt collected it, and Nico Hischier finished with a goal. Now, Jesper Bratt was the only one who was credited with an assist, and Bill Spalding said it on air that he hopes that the NHL goes back and reviews it and ends up giving Noesen the secondary assist. And if they do so, then Noesen will also have 10 points in 10 game appearances. Offense is not the issue for New Jersey. Let me just make that perfectly clear, but wanted to give credit where credit is due. Dougie Hamilton is on a 4-game point streak. He got the secondary assist on Hischier's goal in the third period. All in all, I know I jokingly said that the Devils did everything right except win the game. I might catch some heat for this, but in my humble opinion, the Devils deserved to win this game. Based on what I saw, they dominated the Red Wings. They were doing everything right defensively. Their offense was still strong. Unfortunately, they made a few mistakes down the stretch in the first period. Some calls didn't go their way. Markstrom didn't really look all that sharp in between the pipes. If you look at the deserve to win-o-meter, it goes into the Devils' favor heavily. So my thing is, like, I think the Devils, if we're being completely honest from an optics standpoint, they deserve to win this game. And at least they're showing some sort of improvement, but still not good enough for me. All right. We're going to talk about some of the missed calls that the referees had and how it costed the Devils. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Prize Picks. I've actually used Prize Picks many times, especially during the basketball season. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineup stays in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Okay, let's talk about what went wrong for the Devils, because I used this word to describe the Devils, I think a couple of weeks ago, which was opportunistic, as in, even if they don't deserve to win the game, they still find ways to tip the odds back into their favor. And I think that's what the Detroit Red Wings did in this game. I think a big example is the first period, because anyone who saw the game noticed that the Devils were in control for, I'd say, 95% of that period. They had a strong 18 minutes. But here's the thing, the period is 20 minutes. What do I mean by that? The Devils had a bad series of events the final 2 minutes in that period, which resulted in the Red Wings heading into the locker room for the first intermission with a 2-1 lead. What happened that tied the game? Christian Fischer, he controlled the puck, and Jacob Markstrom, he got a little too jumpy. He dove onto the ground way too early, and Fischer was able to get himself an easy goal. All right, so it's tied 1-1. It totally sucks. Devils learned their lesson, right? Nope. About 30 seconds later, Luke Hughes could not connect on a pass, resulted in a turnover, and Alex DeBrincat, unassisted, scored, and that gave the Red Wings a 2-1 lead. Once again, the Devils had a very good first period for the most part. They got a power play goal thanks to their captain. The Red Wings weren't getting that many shots on Markstrom. It was going somewhat swimmingly for New Jersey, but now going into the intermission, they're trailing 2-1 despite a very good first period. That cannot happen. And in the second period, the Devils tied it up thanks to Eric Haula, and that was the only goal in the second period. And then the third period is when Pandora's box opened and all hell broke loose. And I think a couple calls didn't go into the Devils' favor, and I think that's what costed them in the end. Mentioning Christian Fischer once again, let's talk about his scuffle with Brendan Dillon. All right, a little more than halfway done with the third period, Christian Fischer knocked Brendan Dillon into the boards, and Brendan Dillon didn't like it. So as soon as he regained control of his bearings, he dropped the mitts and he fought Fischer. Gloves come off. All right, both players have to go to the penalty box for about 5 minutes. We know that. But here's the problem. The referees gave Brendan Dillon a roughing as well. So Dillon is given a double whammy. And that kind of screwed the Devils, because as a result, the Red Wings were able to get a power play goal thanks to Dylan Larkin. Here's a problem, and Bryce Salvador, Ken Danico, and Bill Spaulding talked about it on air, which is you got to be aware of the situation, which is it's a tie game. It's in the third period. You didn't call a boarding on Fischer, which is your prerogative. All right, fine. Both players have to go to the penalty box for fighting, and they have to sit for 5 minutes. We get that. But the thing is, you can't give Dillon a roughing call and not assess anything on Fischer. That didn't really make much sense. Why are you giving Dillon a roughing call when he has to sit for 5 minutes for fighting? That doesn't make sense. Or give Fischer 2 minutes for boarding. Either give them both the double whammy, the double penalty, or don't do it at all. Just give them a fighting major. I was a little confused by that. All right. Anyway, Larkin made it a 3-2 game in favor of the Red Wings. Luckily, once again, Captain Nico Hischier came through with a power play goal, but this is where things get even more interesting. So how did the Devils go on the man advantage? Well, Nico had an open lane, and Ben Sherratt hooked him to prevent him from getting an easy goal, and the Devils did not like that in the slightest, and there was sort of a meetup of the players, if you would, if I'm putting it nicely. Timo Meier, he wasn't too pleased with how Ben Sherratt was playing Nico. So he and Larkin get into it. Both of them have to go to the penalty box for roughing. And then Jonathan Kovacevic got into it with Ben Sherratt. And both of them are given a 5-minute major. Keep in mind, Sherratt already has to sit for hooking Nico Hischier. But here's where I'm confused with that assessment. If you look back at that quote unquote fight, Sherratt and Kovacevic kept their gloves on. That should not be a fighting major. If anything, that should just be a roughing. Because as we all know, what constitutes a fight in the NHL is when you take off your mitts. Case in point, we already saw it with Dillon and Fisher. But the referees gave Kovacevic and Sherratt 5-minute major, and both of them have to go sit. Sherratt already had to sit just because of his hooking. Meyer and Raymond are in the penalty box. It was a crowded sin bin for both respective teams. But you're probably wondering, how did this screw the Devils? Well, Nico Hischier, he gets a power play goal, ties the game, and Jonathan Berggren checks back into the game because he was serving the hooking call for Sherratt, who has to continue to sit due to his fighting major. But Jonathan Kovacevic also has to sit in the penalty box for a few extra minutes. And then Dawson Mercer got an ill-advised penalty. It was on Dawson Mercer for getting it, don't get me wrong, but he got a cross-checking call, and the Devils have to go back on the PK. Here's the thing about Kovacevic. He's one of the Devils' main penalty killers. So the Devils don't have one of their best penalty killers out on the rink when the Red Wings are about to go on the power play, and Patrick Kane waltzed pretty much for a goal to make it a 4-3 game in favor of the Red Wings, and the Devils could not tie it. See, that's where I thought the Devils got screwed, because Red Wings go back on the power play, and Jonathan Kovacevic isn't out there, one of the best penalty killers for New Jersey this season. Devils got screwed in that sort of aspect, not once, but twice. Brendan Dillon being given a hooking and a fighting major. Kovacevic, fighting major, despite not dropping the mitts with Sherratt. They just tussled each other. It was just a mess. But here's the thing. This goes both ways. Did the Devils get screwed? Absolutely. In my opinion, they did by the referees. And this was talked about post-game, which is some calls didn't go into the Devils' favor. But the thing is like, you have to make sure that you're in a better position, so that way when those calls don't go your way, you're not put behind the 8 ball. I think a good case is the last matchup against the Lightning. Remember when Dawson Mercer was given goalie interference despite Victor Hedman being all up on him and running him into Johansson? I said that the NHL got it wrong. But the thing is like, the Devils, they were down 6-4. Yes, they scored 2 unanswered goals to begin the third period, but it's the Devils' fault for putting themselves into that sort of situation. Now, if that goalie interference wasn't called, do the Devils amount the comeback against the Lightning, send it into OT, or end up winning? I don't really know. Chances are unlikely, but you do have to factor that in. And in this game, if you take away those 2 goals by the Red Wings that were scored via the power play, thanks to the Brendan Dillon mishap and the Jonathan Kovacevic mishap, and for any Red Wings fans who are listening to this, I'm also coming to the defense of Sherratt, because Sherratt didn't drop the mitts either in that scuffle. Just putting that out there. But anyway, Dillon, Kovacevic having to sit for an extended period of time, and as a result, the Red Wings work that into their favor. So you take away those 2 goals, and you obviously take away the empty netter goal. The Devils should have won this game 3-2. But here's what I'm also going to add, and this is a similar point that I made early on in this segment, which is the Devils have to do a better job of closing out periods, because the first period, they were good for the first 18 minutes, but unfortunately, they couldn't close out in the final 2 minutes. They let the Red Wings score 2 unanswered goals, and Jacob Markstrom wasn't exactly strong in between the pipes. He's been so-so the past few games, if I'm being completely honest, and I've been coming to the defense of Markstrom and Allen. But in this case, I can't defend Markstrom. Letting that goal to Fisher, he just dove too early. And then Luke Hughes had a costly turnover that gave the Red Wings a 2-1 lead entering the first intermission. Or to add on to that, Dawson Mercer, I think he knew it, shouldn't have gotten that penalty. Cross-checking, should have been cleaner, should have been smarter. My thing for everyone, a part of the Devils discourse, yes, the Devils got screwed with these calls, but you can't put yourself in a position where the calls aren't going your way and now it just piles on problems that you're already dealing with. So if Markstrom was better in between the pipes, if Luke Hughes didn't have that turnover, if Dawson Mercer didn't get that penalty in the first place, then maybe the Devils end up shutting out the Red Wings. I'm not really going to go that far, but just hypothetically speaking, this game was just like very confusing to follow, especially with all the penalties that were being piled on in the third period. Final verdict is yes, the referees screwed the Devils, but the Devils are their own worst enemy because they had some mistakes themselves that they really shouldn't have had. And now you see that the calls aren't going your way and it's too far gone. Don't put yourself into that situation in the first place. That's all I'm going to say. All right. I'm going to compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Go to FanDuel.com to look at the odds, and please remember to always gamble responsibly. All right, let's compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade, and get out of here. Shots on goal differential, 40-20 in favor of the Devils. Cam Talbot, he's not supposed to be this good, is he? The Red Wings were dealing with some sickness going around. The Red Wings were dealing with some sort of illness that was making its way through their locker room, and they were down a few players. They're relying on Talbot. They shouldn't be this good, should they? Well, sometimes luck is on your side. Power plays, Devils were 3 for 5, 2 of them belonging to Nico Hischier. Round of applause to the captain. But Detroit was 2 for 4. Hits, 37-24 in favor of the Devils. Once again, very aggressive in this game, and I loved the physicality. Giveaways, 10-9 in favor of Detroit. Takeaways, 12-10 in favor of the Devils. Block shots, 16-14 in favor of Detroit. Penalty minutes, 22-20 in favor of Detroit. All right. If I have to give the Devils a letter grade, this is a tough one because, like I said, I do feel like they were screwed by a couple of calls assessed by the referees. But at the same time, they put themselves into that not so good position. I will give them a D+ because they should have won this game, but they didn't. They found a way to lose it. And somehow, some way, here we are. And now they got another game when this episode goes live later tonight against the New York Islanders. And we all know, dating back to last season, the Devils usually struggle on the back end of a back-to-back. They got to come out with some sort of energy, and they got to come out with a purpose, similar to what they did in this game, but try to convert it into a win. Let me know what you guys thought of this matchup. Do you think the Devils were screwed over by a couple of bad calls by the referees? What are your thoughts on the game in general? Do you think the Devils truly deserve to win? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMat4 or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for his episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.